Dealing with death is heavy, but some people treat a funeral home like a one-star motel with bad service. We are talking about the most entitled, bizarre, and flat-out stupid complaints ever filed by grieving relatives who clearly lost their common sense along with their loved ones. From an uncle demanding a bouncy castle in the parking lot, to a widow seeking a refund because her husband was supposedly reincarnated as a golden retriever. These stories prove that some people will demand to speak to the manager even at the gates of eternity. 1. Appearance is everything to some, but one widow had a very specific problem with the pallbearers. She filed a complaint because the staff members were wearing boring black suits instead of vibrant, colorful outfits that matched her late husband's tropical theme. She actually argued that the somber attire of the professionals was killing the vibe and making her photos look too depressing for her Facebook feed. In her mind, the staff should have worn Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops to ensure the aesthetic consistency of the entire afternoon. 2. You are supposed to look your best for eternity, but one sister felt entirely upstaged by the deceased. She stormed into the office demanding they change her sister out of a glamorous designer gown and into regular sweatpants. Her reasoning was that she had not had time to get her hair done, and the corpse was making her look bad in front of the extended family. She seriously expected the staff to downgrade the burial outfit so she could be the best-looking person in the room. 3. Keeping children entertained during a wake is tough, but one uncle expected a full-blown carnival. He filed a formal grievance because the funeral home refused to let him set up an inflatable bouncy castle in the parking lot. He claimed the kids were bored out of their minds and that a neon jump house would perfectly celebrate his grandfather's playful spirit. Would you ever let your kids bounce around outside a chapel, or has society completely lost its mind? 4. We have all seen gift shops at museums, but one guest was offended that the funeral home did not have one for souvenirs. He filed a complaint stating it was a missed opportunity that he could not buy a branded t-shirt or a keychain to remember the event. He genuinely argued that a merchandise booth in the lobby would help people cope by giving them a physical item to take home. He even suggested they sell coffee mugs with the date of the service. Does a funeral need a gift shop? Or has our consumer culture finally reached its absolute limit? 5. Planning an event is stressful, but one bride-turned-widow took preparation way too far. She demanded a full mandatory dress rehearsal for the funeral the night before, complete with an empty casket run-through. When the staff told her they do not do practice runs for burials, she accused them of zero professionalism. She literally wanted all the pallbearers and guests to practice crying and walking down the aisle to ensure the real event went off without a single hitch. 6. Driving a hearse requires a certain level of dignity, but one family found the driver's silence to be incredibly rude. They filed a report stating that the driver should have acted more like a professional tour guide during the procession to the cemetery. Their complaint suggested he should have pointed out local landmarks and shared interesting trivia about the town to keep the atmosphere light. They genuinely expected a 20-minute history lesson while following a coffin through traffic. It is a funeral procession, not a sightseeing bus tour around the city center. 7. Decorating for the seasons is normal, but one family demanded a total calendar shift. They threw a massive fit because the funeral home refused to put up a massive Christmas tree and play holiday carols in the middle of August. They claimed December was the deceased's favorite month and expected the lobby to look like the North Pole. When the director declined to fake a winter wonderland in 90-degree heat, they accused him of hating the holiday spirit. 8. Clipping coupons is a great way to save money on groceries, but not on a mahogany casket. A man tried to hand the director a 20% off coupon from a local mattress store, arguing that a casket is technically just a bed for the afterlife. He was absolutely baffled when the funeral home would not honor a random furniture promotion. Do you think people really lack this much common sense? Or was he just hoping to scam his way into a much cheaper burial? 9. Social media clout makes people do the absolute most unhinged things. A teenage grandson completely lost his temper because the casket lid was already open when he walked into the private viewing room. He marched up to the director and demanded they close it, secure the latch, and let him film a dramatic unboxing video for his subscribers. He actually claimed that ruining his aesthetic grand reveal was a direct violation of his creative rights as an aspiring content creator. 10. Scent memory is a powerful thing, but this request crossed straight into the bizarre. A widow complained that the soft floral incense used in the chapel was making her nauseous. Instead, she demanded the staff set up hot plates in the corners of the room and fry actual bacon throughout the entire visitation. She insisted her husband loved breakfast meat and that the smell of pork fat would bring absolute comfort. Imagine smelling a roadside diner while mourning a heavy loss. 11. A family decided to turn a respectful visitation into a literal pizza party by ordering 4 large pepperoni pies and wings to the chapel entrance. When the funeral director politely asked them to eat in the lounge, they filed a formal complaint. They argued the deceased loved pizza, and the staff was being a total buzzkill by not letting them eat greasy slices over the open casket. They genuinely thought the smell of garlic and cheese was a better tribute than traditional flowers or incense. Do you think a funeral home should allow takeout at the casket? 12. One widow took cost-cutting to a level that borders on the truly absurd by demanding staff remove her husband's expensive Italian suit minutes before the burial. Her plan was to return the clothing to the department store for a full refund since he did not need designer labels underground. When the director explained the ethical and sanitary issues with returning used burial clothes, she accused the business of conspiring with retail chains to steal her money. 13. In the age of social media, some people believe every moment needs professional production value, even a final goodbye. A niece was absolutely livid because the funeral home did not provide high-end ring lights or softboxes for the viewing room. She filed a grievance stating the standard warm lighting made her skin look blotchy in her morning selfies. She seriously expected the mortician to double as a professional lighting technician, so her Instagram feed would look flawless while she posed next to the floral wreaths. Where do we draw the line with vanity? 14. Music is a powerful way to remember someone, but one heavy metal fan wanted to turn the chapel into a literal mosh pit. He was outraged when the funeral director stepped in to stop several young guests from shoving each other during a high-volume thrash metal track. The son filed a complaint claiming the staff was suppressing his father's true personality and that a few bruised ribs were a small price for a legendary send-off. He honestly believed the funeral home should be a safe space for stage diving off the wooden pews. 15. A Florida family decided the cemetery was high-end real estate and expected the view to match their heavy investment. They filed a formal complaint because the sightline from the grave plot was partially obstructed by a large, ancient oak tree. They argued that since they paid for a premium lot, they deserved a clear view of the nearby lake, even though the deceased was 6 feet under and could not enjoy the scenery. The family demanded the funeral home cut down the 50-year-old tree just to improve the aesthetic value of their burial photos. 16. One man turned his own total lack of punctuality into a reason for serious legal threats against the business. He missed the entire funeral service because he decided to stop at a car wash on the way to the chapel so his vehicle would shine in the procession. When he arrived to find an empty building because everyone had already left for the burial, he filed a complaint demanding a full refund. He argued that the director should have personally called his cell phone to check his location before letting the priest start the service. 17. Silence during a visitation is usually a sign of deep respect, but one woman found it unbearable and offensive. She wrote a scathing review because the funeral home did not provide upbeat background music to stimulate cheerful conversation. According to her, the lack of top 40 pop hits made guests feel awkward and forced them to think about death, which she felt was a very poor marketing decision for the facility. She suggested installing speakers in every corner so people could hang out, essentially turning the wake into a failed cocktail party. 18. A grandson filed a formal grievance because the black Cadillac Hearse was a 2-year-old model instead of the current year's release. He claimed that transporting his grandfather in a slightly older vehicle gave the impression that the family had financial troubles and lacked social standing. He honestly expected the funeral home to lease a brand new luxury SUV just for their 20-minute drive to the cemetery to maintain his image in front of the neighbors. Does the brand or the year of the hearse actually matter at all to you? 19. A widow was deeply disappointed with the service because the funeral home did not hire a professional butterfly trainer to release exactly 100 monarchs the moment the casket was lowered. When told that butterflies are living creatures that do not always fly in a straight line, she accused the staff of laziness and lack of vision. She seriously suggested keeping the insects in a heated box and training them to fly in a perfect heart shape over the mourning family just so she could get a viral video for her social media page. 20. Modern technology is everywhere, but one man was outraged that the cemetery did not have high-speed Wi-Fi at the gravesite. He filed a complaint stating he could not properly live stream the burial to his followers because the signal kept dropping near the back fence. He blamed the funeral home for not installing a series of portable signal boosters along the procession route for the convenience of his digital audience. He genuinely believed that a lack of 5G coverage was the sign of a low-class establishment that did not value influencers. 21. A grieving daughter was deeply offended when she received her father's cremated remains because the ashes were not the specific shade of silver she expected. She brought a metallic paint swatch from a hardware store and complained that the dusty gray color did not match her father's vibrant personality or his favorite sports car. She actually demanded the funeral home reprocess the remains to achieve a more aesthetic, shimmering finish for the decorative urn. It is hard to imagine the level of confusion the director felt explaining that biology does not work like a custom paint job. 22. You would think a professional appearance is a requirement, but one family filed a grievance because the funeral director's tie was too trendy. They argued that his silk paisley necktie was a distraction that drew eyes away from the floral arrangements and the casket. The niece actually suggested that all staff should wear heavy, itchy wool suits from the 1920s to ensure they looked appropriately miserable. They genuinely believed that being fashionable was a sign of disrespect and demanded a discount for the emotional distress caused by a well-coordinated accessory during the service. 23. Rain during a graveside service is usually seen as a somber blessing, but one man saw it as a breach of contract. He filed a formal complaint because the funeral home did not provide individual heated umbrellas for every single guest in attendance. He argued that the standard canopy was insufficient because his expensive suede loafers got slightly damp while walking from the limo. He actually demanded the facility reimburse him for a brand new pair of shoes due to the hostile weather conditions. Do you think a funeral home is responsible for the sky, or was this just a desperate cash grab? 24. We have all heard of comfort food, but one son wanted to turn his father's final resting place into a pantry. He was furious that the casket did not come with a built-in, insulated compartment for snacks and a bottle of scotch. He claimed his father was a big eater, and it was cruel to send him into eternity without a sandwich for the journey. He actually threatened to leave a 1-star review because the staff refused to tuck a hot roast beef sandwich under the silk lining, fearing it would cause a biological disaster before the burial. 25. Choosing a font for a headstone is a permanent decision, but one perfectionist widow treated it like a graphic design project gone wrong. She filed a formal complaint 3 months after the burial because the serifs on the capital letters looked too aggressive and made her late husband look angry in stone. She demanded the cemetery remove the 2-ton granite monument and replace it with a version using a softer, more rounded font. She genuinely believed the typography was haunting her dreams and insisted the funeral home pay for the entire replacement and labor costs. 26. A woman was absolutely outraged that her mother was buried next to a complete stranger who had a tacky tombstone. She filed a grievance stating that the neighbor's grave featured a statue of a garden gnome, which ruined the high-class atmosphere she wanted for her family plot. She actually asked the funeral home to dig up her mother and move her to a more exclusive section where the neighbors had better taste in lawn ornaments. Would you care who is buried next to your loved ones? Or is the afterlife not the place for a neighborhood watch committee? 27. Usually, people want the most direct route to the cemetery, but one family was incensed that the hearse driver used a GPS. They claimed that using satellite navigation was soulless and that the driver should have memorized every back road in the county to prove he cared about the deceased. They filed a complaint because the digital voice of the GPS was audible for 3 seconds, which they claimed shattered the sacred silence of the drive. They genuinely expected the driver to have a photographic memory of every street corner just to satisfy their desire for a traditional, tech-free experience. 28. A funeral home in Ohio received a scathing letter because the officiating priest was too happy during the celebration of life. The family complained that his smile was offensive and that he should have maintained a look of crushing despair for the entire hour. Even though the service was specifically requested to be a celebration, they were mad that he did not cry along with them. They actually suggested the funeral home should provide grief coaching to the clergy to ensure they look sufficiently depressed, regardless of what the actual family had originally asked for. 29. Superstition can be powerful, but one man took it to the extreme at the cemetery. He refused to allow the burial to proceed because the plot was located in the row 13. He filed a formal complaint on the spot, accusing the funeral home of cursing his family and trying to bring bad luck upon the surviving relatives. He demanded they move the entire service to row 12 or 14, even though those spots were already occupied by other people. He literally stood over the open grave and refused to budge until they promised him a luckier location for free. 30. Battery life is important, but this guest took charging his phone to a highly disrespectful level. The director walked into the viewing room to find the primary spotlight on the casket completely shut off. A distant cousin had unplugged the main display lamp just to charge his dead tablet so he could play Candy Crush during the eulogy. When asked to move to a wall outlet, he complained that the staff was being hostile to gamers and hindering his personal coping mechanism. 31. Complimentary refreshments are standard, but one family treated the lobby like a high-end bistro. They filed an angry report because the bottled water provided was a generic brand, instead of luxury imported sparkling water from France. According to their complaint, drinking tap-filtered water during a time of grief was a direct insult to their refined palates and social standing. The widow actually suggested that the funeral home should offer a full menu of artisan beverages to help guests stay hydrated in style. Would you really care about the brand of water while saying goodbye? Or is that just peak entitlement? 32. Is there such a thing as being too safe underground? One man was terrified that his father was being buried too deep and demanded the cemetery crew stop at 4 feet instead of 6. His formal grievance stated that the extra depth would make the deceased feel claustrophobic and trapped in the dark. He genuinely argued that the weight of the extra soil was spiritually crushing and insisted the funeral home provide a discount for the unused space. It is hard to argue with someone who believes the dead can feel the literal pressure of the earth and the weight of the dirt. 33. Floral tributes are usually a kind gesture, but one perfectionist daughter saw them as a direct threat to her aesthetic. She filed a formal complaint because a distant cousin sent a cheap bouquet of carnations that clashed with her expensive orchids. She actually demanded the funeral staff hide the ugly flowers in the closet so they would not ruin the professional photography. In her mind, a funeral is a curated stage production where every petal must match the color palette of the program. Imagine being more worried about a stray carnation than the actual service. 34. Walking into a smoke-filled room is usually reserved for a dive bar, but one uncle wanted that vibe for the visitation. He was absolutely incensed that the funeral home did not have an indoor cigar lounge for the men to discuss the family estate. His complaint stated that the law against indoor smoking should not apply to grieving relatives who need a nicotine fix to process their emotions. He even suggested that the staff provide premium ashtrays and lighters as a standard courtesy. Some people truly think their personal habits take priority over fire safety and local health codes. 35. Makeup for the deceased is a delicate art, yet one sister acted like she was at a high-end beauty counter. She filed a grievance because the shade of red lipstick on her mother was too autumn for a spring burial. She actually sat by the casket and tried to apply her own gloss while criticizing the mortician's color theory in front of the guests. According to her complaint, the funeral home failed to capture the deceased's inner glow by using a matte finish instead of a satin one. Do you think makeup accuracy matters for a burial, or is this just obsession? 36. Guest registers are for signatures, but one millennial relative wanted an interactive experience. He left a scathing review because the sign-in book did not feature a 5-star rating system next to each name. He argued that guests should be able to publicly rate the eulogies, the floral arrangements, and the overall vibe of the memorial service. He genuinely treated his aunt's funeral like a Yelp page and was mad the staff would not provide red pens for grading. 37. Peaceful rest is the goal of any cemetery, but one woman was convinced the neighboring grave was too loud. She filed a complaint because a family 3 plots over was playing soft music during their own private memorial. She argued that the vibrations of the acoustic guitar were disturbing her mother's eternal slumber and demanded the staff physically remove the other family. She actually believed she had purchased sound rights for the entire acre and was offended that anyone else dared to exist in the same zip code. Talk about a very literal, not in my backyard attitude. 38. Horse-drawn carriages add a touch of class, but the logistics can be a total nightmare for a modern facility. One man was outraged that the funeral home did not have a dedicated hitching post or a valet service for the 2 horses he hired for the procession. He filed a formal grievance because the animals had to wait in the sun, claiming the business lacked equine hospitality. He even demanded a refund for the horse rental because the staff did not provide buckets of premium oats and water for the team during the 1-hour service. 39. Looking at peace is the highest compliment for a mortician, but for one family, it was a total deal-breaker. They filed a formal complaint because their uncle looked too alive in the casket, which they claimed was terrifying the younger children. They argued that the funeral home should have made him look more statue-like and less like he was just taking a nap. They actually suggested the staff use more white powder to ensure he looked properly deceased for the viewing. It is a wild world when you get yelled at for doing your job too perfectly. 40. Repurposing flowers after a service is common, but one guest wanted to turn it into a side hustle. He was furious when the funeral home refused to let him take 10 large arrangements home so he could sell them at a local flea market the next morning. His complaint stated that the flowers were going to waste and that the staff was being greedy by not letting him profit from the leftovers. He even accused them of stealing his potential income. Would you ever try to flip funeral flowers for cash? Or is that just the lowest point of greed? 41. Some people expect a lot from a lobby, but one cousin treated the funeral home like a high-end Starbucks. A formal complaint was filed because the complimentary coffee machine did not offer oat milk or sugar-free vanilla syrup. The visitor argued that being forced to drink regular dairy in a time of mourning was dietary discrimination and ruined his focus during the eulogy. He actually suggested the funeral home hire a full-time barista to craft latte art of the deceased's face to make the experience more personal. Is caffeine really the priority here, or have we reached peak coffee snobbery? 42. Sustainability is a hot topic, but one guest brought his environmental activism to the cemetery gates. He was absolutely furious that the funeral home did not have high-speed electric vehicle charging stations installed right next to the gravesites. His grievance stated that he had to cut his visit short to find a Tesla supercharger, which he blamed on the dinosaur-age infrastructure of the facility. He genuinely expected a century-old cemetery to provide level 3 charging so he could top up his battery while paying his final respects. 43. Some businesses offer rewards programs, but pitching one at a mortuary is a bold choice. A grieving son was genuinely furious that the funeral director refused to give him a punch card for his business. He argued that since he had buried 3 relatives there in the last decade, his 4th funeral should be absolutely free. When told that volume discounts do not apply to human mortality, he threatened to take his family's future tragedies to a cheaper competitor across town. 44. Modern streaming has changed everything, but one family was ready to sue over a playlist. They were outraged when the funeral director explained they could not play a copyrighted Hollywood movie soundtrack during the live-streamed service due to platform takedown rules. The complaint stated that the digital police were ruining their grieving process and that the funeral home should have pre-cleared the rights with a major record label. They actually expected a small family business to negotiate a global licensing deal for a 3-minute pop song. 45. Nature is unpredictable, but one man saw a squirrel as a direct insult to his family legacy. He filed a formal complaint because a squirrel was staring disrespectfully at him from a nearby tree during the burial. He argued that the funeral home should employ a full-time pest control officer to clear all wildlife from the premises before any service begins. He genuinely believed the animal was mocking his emotional state and demanded a partial refund for the psychological trauma caused by a curious rodent. Do you think we should just ban nature from cemeteries? 46. Comfort usually ends at the grave, but one grandson had a very strange concern about the lining of the casket. He was deeply offended that the silk interior did not have lumbar support for his grandfather's back. He filed a grievance claiming that even though his grandfather was deceased, the lack of ergonomic design was a sign of cheap craftsmanship. He actually wanted the funeral home to swap the standard pillow for a high-end orthopedic version to ensure the body was perfectly aligned for the afterlife. 47. Managing a guest list is a nightmare, but one widow expected the staff to act like secret agents. She was incensed that the funeral home allowed the deceased's ex-wife to enter the building and sit in the back row. Her formal complaint argued that the staff should have performed background checks on every guest to filter out anyone with a complicated history. She seriously expected the director to maintain a no-fly list of former partners and physically tackle them if they stepped onto the property. 48. Efficiency isn't always appreciated, especially when the bill is high. A brother filed a complaint because the funeral service ended 10 minutes earlier than the scheduled hour. He argued that since the family paid for 60 minutes of chapel time, they were being cheated out of their per-minute value by the quick-speaking minister. He actually demanded a prorated refund for the 10 minutes of unused air conditioning and lighting. It is truly wild to treat a final farewell like a parking meter that ran out of time. 49. Seeing a loved one for the last time is emotional, but for one daughter, it was a chance for a digital makeover. She was furious that the funeral home's memorial slideshow did not include beauty filters on the old photos of her mother. Her complaint stated that the staff should have used AI to remove wrinkles, whiten teeth, and fix bad hair days from snapshots taken in the 1980s. She genuinely believed that presenting her mother as she actually looked was a betrayal of her glamorous spirit. 50. Usually people complain about the smell of chemicals, but one woman was mad about the lack of oxygen. She filed a grievance claiming that the large crowd in the chapel was stealing her air and that the funeral home should have provided personal oxygen tanks for the VIP guests. She argued that the stuffy atmosphere was a deliberate attempt to make people leave early and save on utility costs. She actually demanded a voucher for a spa day to re-oxygenate her system after the ordeal. Would you ever ask for your own air tank at a funeral? 51. A premium walnut casket is usually a symbol of dignity, but for one fashion-forward niece, it was a total disaster. Clashing wood grain was the primary focus of her grievance because it didn't match her custom emerald silk dress for the family portraits. Instead of focusing on the eulogy, she spent the entire service complaining that the funeral director should have warned her about the specific undertones of the varnish. Her expectation was a professional color consultation weeks in advance to ensure her outfit popped against the wood. 52. Gratuity is standard at a restaurant, but finding a basic service fee on the final invoice absolutely horrified one grieving son. His formal complaint stated that since the staff did not smile enough while carrying the heavy casket, they did not earn the right to charge for labor. Pallbearers were expected to provide a theatrical, joyous performance to justify the costs in his mind. Have we really reached a point where we expect a choreographed dance routine from the people burying our relatives for extra cash? 53. During the private viewing, a woman's agitation grew because her late husband's eyebrows looked slightly more judgmental than they did in real life. The report she filed claimed the mortician was secretly taking sides in their marriage by giving the deceased a permanent, stony scowl. Emergency reconstructive surgery was her only solution, and she demanded the staff fix his expression before the guests arrived. Critiques from a corpse are a new level of stress that no amount of professional training can truly prepare a director for. 54. If you think traffic is a nightmare, try navigating a funeral procession with a backseat driver who thinks they know a shortcut to the afterlife. Detouring through a scenic park for 5 miles was the demand of one frustrated man who wanted to reminisce one last time. Being called heartless robots for following the direct route to the cemetery was just the beginning of his lengthy complaint. Wandering through busy city streets with a 20-car convoy seemed like a perfectly reasonable request to him regardless of the schedule. 55. The absolute peak of funeral home entitlement came when reincarnation into a golden retriever was used as the excuse for a full refund request. This man argued that since his wife was back in the world in a different form, the burial service was technically a waste of money and a breach of contract. Paying back the thousands of dollars became a legal demand since the customer was no longer technically dead, according to his psychic. Would you ever try to sue a mortuary based on a spiritual intuition, or is that the ultimate scam? There you have it. 55 stories that prove grief and common sense rarely live in the same house. People will find a reason to complain about anything, even when they are standing on holy ground. Do you think these families are actually sad, or are they just using a tragedy to see what they can get for free? Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of human stupidity.